This is just a quick video on how to do the valve clearances on a CB404. So, got the tank off. I'll take the cap off. I think this one's probably the easiest to see. Under here you can see the rocker arm and the top of the valve. So first of all we need to turn it so that that one is not on the cam. So I've taken the points cover off and I'll turn the engine until we see that rocker go down. Let it go down, all the way back up, and then go half a turn. So that rocker's now not on the cam. See what that feels like. That's got absolutely loads of play in it. So we need a 9mm spanner, and then there is actually a proper tool for doing this that holds the valve, adjust it and lock it off, which I haven't got. So I'm just using a E5 Torx and 9mm spanner. So back off the lock nut. See, I always find it easier to take the blade out of the feeler gauge set, so I'm setting these to 0.05mm. So slide that under. First of all, I'll just get it somewhere near. So what we're looking for is just a little bit of drag on the feeler gauge. So that's about right. So hold the top nut as you lock off the rocker. That feels about right actually. Make sure everything's nice and tight. So we've got just a little bit of drag on the feeler gauge there, and if you look at that rocker, it's a nice, just a small amount of play, just to allow for thermal expansion as the engine warms up. That one's done. Now, you can do this in a sequence so that you can adjust multiple valves at the same time, but it's very easy to get yourself tied in a knot and make a mistake. So I always find it easier just to watch the rocker, wind it all the way down, and then wind it all the way up, and you know that valve is off the cam. So I'll go around the other 7 of these now, and then we'll give it a run and see what it sounds like. Setting the valve clearances on the Honda and taking it for its first ride, which was a limited success. So I've got setting off, it sounded fine, don't know if it'll fire up now. Running on all 4 cylinders, sounds okay, it's a little sluggish from the throttle. Then, problems. So what I think it is the, because I've got a free flowing silencer on it and there isn't actually an air filter in it at the moment, it's running lean. So what I might just do is whip the carbs off, just check the jets are free, and I might go up a few jet sizes, because if you put the choke on just a little bit it'll rev up. So I'll whip the carbs off and have a look at the jets. The other thing that I know is an issue is the ignition points, the back plate, one of the screws that sets the points, the threads are pretty iffy, so I'm wondering if the points have just closed up a little bit as well. But I was sort of expecting these teething problems, so we'll get into it and I'll see if I can find out what the issue is and get it running a bit better. So I do remember these being a bit quicker than this one is too. back on with the 404. I actually gave it a bit of a road test the other day and it ran pretty terribly. There were a few things that I sort of knew about. There was an issue with the points, and I wasn't sure on the fueling because it's got sort of a straight through exhaust, and at the time it didn't have an air filter in. So I've pulled the spark plugs, and to my surprise, they all look fairly good. So these are probably just a little bit too light brown, which means it's a little bit lean. So what I've done is add standard main jets in. So I've changed the main jets, which were 75 as standard, to 78s, just to try and get in the right sort of ballpark for the free-flowing exhaust. And I've actually got an air filter clip, so that should also richen up the mixture a little bit. But these aren't terrible, and all 4 plugs look pretty much the same. So the bike had a pretty nasty bog when you opened the throttle, and a bit of a miss, and it struggled to get past it, which initially I was thinking was a fueling issue. But I think it's probably more to do with the ignition system. As it got warmer as well, this problem got worse, and it was sort of going down on a couple of cylinders. So the ignition system had an issue where one of the screws that retains the contact breakers was stripped. So I've taken this to bits, and luckily it was just the threads on the screw that was stripped. The back plate was actually still good. So I've run a tap down those, put a couple of new screws in, and fitted some new points. So as you can see here, I've got the points are fitted, but I haven't fitted the condensers or the wiring yet because I want to set the ignition timing. So to set the ignition timing, the first thing I need to do is set the points. So to set the points, I've left the spark plugs out just to make the engine easy to turn. So if you get a socket, this is what size is that? 22mm socket on the end here. We can turn the engine, and we want to set points 1 and 4 first. So turn the engine clockwise, and you can see the points opening. So go back a bit. You see the points there start to open there, and then they're starting to close there. So if we just go back to the widest point, the points gap on this should be 0.3 to 0.4 mil. So I've got a 0.3 mil feeler gauge. I'm going to stick that between the points. That's probably a little bit tight considering I'm on the lower end of that scale. So I'll loosen that screw. I'll just put that in there. Can be quite fiddly just to get right. So put that in there. Just let them open just a slight bit and lock it off. Still a bit tight. So I want to have it so that there's just a little bit of drag on the feeler gauge. So that one's set. Let's make sure that's locked off. And then turn the engine until points 2 and 3 open. So they're starting to open there. That starts to close, so just go back a bit till they're fully open. Check those. So that's set about right. Just a little bit of drag on the feeler gauge. So now the points are set, there's 2 ways you can set the ignition timing, and that's to do static ignition timing, just using the multimeter as I'm going to do, or if you have one you can use a strobe light and just put the clamp on the HT lead and look into the points mark and set the ignition timing that way. So we're just going to do a static ignition test. So as I said, there's no wiring connected at the moment. So I've just got my multimeter set to continuity. I've wedged one of the probes in the back of the kickstart, and you can see if we touch the engine, it's got continuity. So I'll put this side of the multimeter onto the points there. And we can hear that's got continuity. So now turn the engine clockwise. Until that's stopped. Now this is a bit fiddly, this is why doing it dynamically can be better. So there, the contacts have just started to open there. Only very just started to open, that's. So there we can see it's just start to open. And if we look down that little round hole, we can see we've got the points 1 and 4 timing mark. So you've got a 1.4, and then just to the left of it there's an F. That F should line up with the mark on the casing. So we need to loosen the back plate, and then we need to turn the back plate. If we set the ignition mark to where it should be, let's see. So there, the timing mark's lined up, and then if we set how's that not working? So set the timing mark on there. That's not good. So what I noticed there is the advance unit was jammed up. So with all this tightened up, you should just be able to put your finger on the cam and wobble it. If you can't do that, then the advance won't work properly. So now I've got the 1.4 timing mark lined up. Just set that so it's just going off. And tighten that down. And then if we just go backwards a little bit, and go forwards, so we hear that go off, and see that's when it's bang on the F timing mark, the F14 timing mark. Now on these, so that's the ignition timing set for cylinders 1 and 4. So make sure that's tightened up properly. And you set cylinders 2 and 3 independently. So that's to allow for your difference in adjustment of your contacts. So cylinders 2 and 3 are on these little screws there. So first of all, I think we'll just have a look and see where it is. Be open. So turn it until it goes off. Just back a little bit, now we know where it is. So just there. If you look through, it's actually set fairly close. I'll just adjust it a tiny bit.
What does that one say?
That's the 2-3 F mark, F for fire I think it'll be. So that's closing slightly advanced, so we'll just retard it a tiny bit by going down like that. Tighten those back up. This is a sort of job that you have to do 2 or 3 times just to get right. So I'll just wind it back a little bit. Meter back on. And if we look in there, it's absolutely spot on. So make sure everything's tight. And put the wiring back in and the new set of condensers. So usually the condensers don't give much trouble, but I did notice last time this was running that 1 and 4 had quite a big spark at the points, and 2 and 3 had just a little spark like you'd expect. So sometimes when the spark appears too big at the points and your points are getting burnt, it can be the condenser that's at fault. So the easiest thing to do is just to replace the condensers, have new points, put new condensers on, and then hopefully all the point side of things is sorted. Got the points done. Turns out one of the new condensers was faulty, which is a little annoying, but everything seems to be crap that comes from China now, so I'm going to make the most of it. One of the other problems is the exhaust collets needed doing, and one of the exhaust studs has pulled the threads out. So what I'm going to do is helicoil that, and I haven't got any proper studs now, but I'll just put a piece of a threaded bar in so I can get the exhaust sealed up and get it running properly. So for the helicoils, it's a M6x1. The standard helicoils you get come with short helicoil inserts. I've got some longer inserts, so it's got something to bite on. So you drill it, it's a 6.3mm drill bit. So try and make sure you drill it nice and straight. And then you can, I might actually tap it using the drill. This might look a bit rough, but you can. It's actually easier to keep the tap nice and straight. Bottom. So that's tapped all the way. The kit I borrowed off a friend, and that looks a little bit mauled up. You've got to be careful not to force the helicoil in too far, so that you can't get it out of the driver. The driver should just sit in the end of it. And put the helicoil in. And put that in. So a lot of people don't like helicoils. I think they're great because in an aluminium casing you actually end up with a stainless steel thread. So I think they're much more durable. So that's wound all the way in. Should do is a hammer, which I haven't got to hand. Use the ratchet hammer. Just knock the tab off the end of it. Stops it pulling the helicoil. And now stud should wind nicely in there. As I said, I need to make some proper studs for this. I'll either get some 6mm EN8 bar and thread them, or see if the studs are available. And that's that. So all the gaskets are in. It had with these, the collets are always in pretty bad shape, but there's only certain places you can get the correct size collets from. So I get them from David Silver Spares. So it had 2 good quality collets in there, and then I've ordered another 6. They're about a £5 each, but they're well worth it, because you just can't see the way exhaust without them. So I'll get this exhaust refitted and the airbox on, and hopefully we'll be able to give it a ride. So finally ready for a little test ride. Got the exhaust collets all sorted, carbs jetted, the air cleaner's in now. Been through the point side of the ignition system, so I'm hoping for this to be much more rideable now than it was before, so let's see. Test drive is mostly successful, or test ride. A couple of little things that to address next is when you're just coming off tick over, it's got a little bog and a little stumble. So I'm going to raise the needles a notch in the carburetors, and hopefully that'll enrich the fuel down the bottom end and cure that. The carburetors are still a little bit stiff as well, so I might just go through the linkages properly, strip them all down, and make sure that's nice and free. And the front brake is binding, which is to be expected since it's been stood for a while. So I'll strip that caliper, work it in and out a bit, and hopefully free that up. So thanks for watching, and like and subscribe.